Hello, everyone, and welcome to Who Should Be the Director of Your Next Movie According to AI? Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm Hannah Khan, a journalist, host, and producer specializing in entertainment. I've previously worked for Extra TV and Telepictures Productions, and I received my master's in specialized journalism from USC and my bachelor's in theater from Northwestern University. Now, before we jump in, I would like to encourage you all to submit any questions you have in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. We'll get to those questions at the end of the presentation. Today's workshop will be exploring case studies showing which director would bring the highest return for films in specific genres according to AI. The film industry is utilizing artificial intelligence more and more for the development and distribution of films. Platforms such as Netflix and Amazon pioneered the usage of AI, and now innovative platforms are making this technology available for independent producers as well. Artificial intelligence can provide key insights during content development, and the technology can also inform decisions such as the selection of a budget, distributor, and director. Today, we will be focusing on an important decision parameter, the director. We'll show you how AI can help you select the director of your next project across genres and budgets. The case studies in this workshop will be provided by Largo, a Swiss company focusing on bringing AI solutions to the film industry through its platform, Largo AI. Largo AI can analyze a film from as early as the script phase until the post-production and distribution phases, and provide insights by analyzing early video versions of the movie. Largo AI received the Best Innovation Prize at the 67th San Sebastian Film Festival and was selected as one of the Horizon 2020 top startups at the Berlin International Film Festival. Largo AI is currently used in the development of hundreds of feature films and series. I'm very excited to announce our two speakers today. Sami Arpa is the founder of Largo AI. He has a background as both a scientist and a filmmaker, so he truly understands the intersection of technology and entertainment. Sami has a PhD in computer science in the field of computational aesthetics, has directed 2 short films, and has founded a film festival. Ilaria Lauzana is the tech lead from Largo AI, who has specialized in machine learning and natural language processing. And now I'd like to hand it over to Sami. Hi, Sami. Oh, you're muted, Sami.
Yeah.
There you go. Hi, how are you?
Hello, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah, thank you for a nice intro, and pleasure to meet with all participants. Please, do not hesitate to write your questions. We will be happy to answer at the end. So the topic of today's webinar might be a bit controversial for some of you. Who should be the director of your next movie according to AI? So is it AI that is going to decide for your director, screenwriter, your budget, your casting? That is a bit controversial. And actually, you will see as we go over the presentation, that is not the case in reality. So here, our main message will be here to show how you can get some insights with the AI that can help you to make your decision. You can consider it as a magnifier in that manner that shows you many aspects for certain decision parameter. So in that regard, our slogan with Largo AI is that empower your gut feeling with artificial intelligence, not replace your gut feeling with artificial intelligence. For us as well, it's really important still to keep the human element at the center of filmmaking. And so Largo AI is learning from a very rich data. We have almost 400,000 movies and series metadata that have been analyzed, and 1.8 million talents have been analyzed as well. Then we have also in-depth analysis for certain films. This is almost 60,000 films that we have movie scripts and dialogues one by one that have been analyzed. With the analysis here, what I mean is a learning process by AI. So we have many of these movies. AI is looking at the content of these films, and it learns certain elements, ingredients about these films that is helpful for it to predict the future. And one big advantage of that, it can do this very fast. As you put in the content, you can get the results in a few minutes. And if we talk about a bit the main innovation from our side is the following. You see these three graphs here, the two graphs in the middle, and then one is DNA-shaped graph. So these are the content elements that we get automatically through AI from a film. This is an example from the movie Little Woman. As we put the script of the film into the system automatically identifies the flow of the genres inside the film. Like you see this top graph in the middle, its age suitability, how it changes over the story from start till the end. And also it creates a DNA of the film, as you see on the right of the slide. We have more than 1,000 attributes that are relevant to the films, and AI has learned about these attributes, and it can automatically identify, once you give a new content, the relevance of your content to these attributes. And it ranks those that we call this ranking as the DNA of your content. With these insights, ingredients, let's call those ingredients. With those ingredients, we can provide very important insights to producers, distributors, and creative people. So we can put this in three categories. One of them is content insights, understanding your content. The other one is the casting propositions. As we understand your content, we have done the same thing also for the actors by analyzing their previous performances. So the system this way can make some auto propositions for the casting. And finally, the market forecast. Because the same way the system has also learned what kind of ingredients can create what kind of impact in certain territory. If we talk about more on this financial part, financial aspect, there are more than 1,000 parameters that are entering to our financial model. And each of them has a different effect in the potential results of the film according to this AI model. So we have content attributes. Then we have all project packaging, like the budget, release date, release country. They all have impact in financial results. And then the fundamental elements, the human elements and company elements of the film, like director, casting, screenwriter, producer, and distributor. These also have a strong impact, obviously, in financial result. And if you look at specifically to those 5 elements, directors, casting, screenwriter, producer, and distributor, we see in the AI model, the distributor is having the highest correlation with the financial success. This is not for each film like that. This is like, you can think like as an average overall all potential films. And then the director is just following the distributor in terms of the correlation with the financial success. Casting, screenwriter, producers, they also have very strong impact actually once you compare to other parameters. But within these 5 parameters, distributor and director becomes very strong. And today our focus will be the directors. And directors, why they become more correlated? There are many aspects that AI is analyzing. One is their content DNA from the previous films. One of the features that AI is analyzing. Here you see an example for 2 big directors, Tarantino and Woody Allen. You see these genre patterns that have been created with our system for these 2 directors, and you can see how they are different. In Tarantino case, almost in all films, you see this, if you look at this as a picture, they are very similar. You see that this rhythm of action, comedy, and crime themes. Once we come to Woody Allen, this change to this repetition of comedy, romance, and drama elements. But this is not only thing, of course. There are many other things like popularity of the director, his experience in certain genre. All of these things have an impact in financial correlation. So here today, in today's case study, we take example films, and then we took our black box financial predictor, which takes more than 1,000 parameters as input, as I mentioned. And as you see on the left, some example parameters, we have the content parameters on the top, and then many packaging parameters like casting, producer, screenwriter, budget, all these elements. So we keep everything stable with an example project, and then we just change the director and to see what AI predicts with the change of the director in terms of financial results. And this way we get the top directors that is found by the system. And overall, we will provide 8 examples from 8 different genres. And for each genre, we also made a separation to test for different budget range. For low budget, mid budget, and high budget range to see how AI preference change according to this budget range. That will be my part. Ilaria will provide more details on those case studies.
This is really fascinating, Sami. Especially, it shows just how important director is in determining the financial success of a film. So my question for you is, when conducting this case study, how many directors in total did you consider?
It is around 600 directors. So 600 directors for each case. We just with AI, we tried one by one to see the potential result.
And did you consider directors from the US or from around the world?
This is US focused. We check the financial results for US box office. For that reason, we used the directors who has released films in US before.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to continue our discussion with Ilaria, Largo AI's tech lead. Hi, Ilaria.
Thank you so much. Hi, thank you so much for the introduction. Hello, everyone. It's exciting to be here with everyone and share with you some of the results of our case studies. So as Sami mentioned earlier, the way this is going to go is I'm going to present briefly an example from each genre. In the case of drama, we have selected the movie The Pursuit of Happiness as an example of the genre. And we are imagining that we're going to release this movie in the future, let's say, next year. Trying to keep everything fixed, except the director. We are choosing the top 5 director, which are found to have the largest increase for each budget bracket. So if we look into the results for drama over here, we have a table over here. Let me just quickly help you figure out what this represents. We have 3 budget brackets. As I mentioned, we have a low budget bracket at the top, which is in purple, and that depicts directors that have whose films have an average budget between $5 and $20 million. We have a medium budget between 20 and 60 million, and a high budget over 60 million. So you'll see the director names on the left, which have the top 5 selected by AI. And we have 2 additional columns. In the second column, you see data from the past. So this is actual data coming from various sources, from our sources. We have a multiplier for the return of investment of the top highest return of investment for each director. So let's take an example for Billy Woodruff, for the first director that is found in the low budget bracket. We see that this highest ROI in the past is 2.5. Let's imagine he has made a movie. He has directed a movie with a budget of $10 million. A multiplier of 2.5 means he has made 2.5 times the budget on top of it. So a revenue in the gross box office in the US of $35 million. So keeping this in mind, the second column will be coming from the past, so data, actual data from the directors, and the last column instead is an increase in the prediction from the AI that comes into play, that we see when we put the name of the director inside our black box model. So once we are adding the director name, the potential increase that we see in the revenue is shown in the last column, this increase in prediction. And we can see, for instance, in the case of Billy Woodruff, as I mentioned, which is an interesting case because someone that has also worked a lot in the music industry. So it's interesting to see him on top of the low budget list for drama. It's a value that goes between 0, of course, to about 40%, as we'll see in other lists. And it's actually 16.7. It's already a really good increase if we consider that this just comes from the director. Everything else in the movie is the same. And within the same budget bracket, we're keeping the budget the same as well. But we're going to switch the budget. We're going to change the budget over different budget brackets. So as I mentioned, the 16.7 increase is really staggering. It's a great increase that we get in the prediction just by changing the director. We are also going to focus on some names specifically from this list to see how this could influence, various aspects could influence the prediction. So in this case, we're selecting Sofia Coppola from the low budget range as well. She has a prediction increase, which is 5.5, a bit lower, but overall good. One interesting thing that we see in drama can be seen from this graph that we have on the bottom. This is a graph that depicts the popularity, how correlated the popularity is against this prediction that we make, that the AI makes. So in the case of drama, we see that we have a slight increase for values over 10,000 for the ranking, so for this popularity, but we have somewhat of a stable value throughout the rest of the ranking, dropping after 60,000. This means that the popularity in the case of drama, in the case of similar projects, is not going to be very, very important in determining how in determining the prediction, so the predicted revenue for the movie. Last thing I wanted to point out was where Sofia Coppola, ends up in this range. The yellow line will depict where the director is located in this popularity ranking. So in the case of Sofia Coppola, we see, in fact, she was found in this area of increase that we see. And overall, we see that she has also a high ROI in the past. We finally analyzed some of the patterns for these directors, as we have shown earlier, to see how this, what this means also in terms of the type of movies they have worked with. For Sofia Coppola, we see a high presence of drama throughout the movies. For instance, in the case of The Beguiled, the second example over here, the blue pattern in the middle depicts drama and shows that drama is very present throughout the full movie. In the case of Lost in Translation, we also see another genre being very important as well, which is the example of comedy, but overall drama is the strongest, the strongest genre present in the movie, and shows the importance of this throughout the full movie. Now, if we're going to go through a few more examples, for instance, we're going to pass to comedy, and we're considering here also dramedies, so comedies with drama as well. We selected another example from the past 20 years. This case, it was Devil Wears Prada. So in the case of comedy, was the Devil Wears Prada. And over here, we have the list for the directors. As a reminder, we have a second column depicting the data in the past. So the ROI, the director, I've actually, from the movies from these directors. And on the right, instead, we see the increase in prediction. And I spoiled it up to you by saying that we would have values that goes up to 40%, which is the case over here. We have medium budget range that has very, very high increase in prediction. And comedy is going to be the genre for which we see the highest increase in predictions overall. This means that it can be possible to get very, very high increase by changing the director only, especially for the medium budget range. And this defines how important choosing a director becomes for a comedy movie. Instead, for the high budget, we see that overall we have a large choice of directors which could have a potential increase. As we see, they're all over very similar they have a very similar prediction, the top 5 that we have selected over here. And in this case, we're going to focus on Jason Reitman, which is an example from our low budget range again. He has also had a very high ROI for his top ROI in the past. It's 18.6, and he has a potential prediction increase of about 10% for the comedy. Overall, if we analyze the same graph for comedy, we already see some differences. In the case of drama, we had almost a stable prediction, but in case of comedy, we do see somewhat of a parabolic decrease. So what we see is that comedy will see the influence of the popularity of the directors a bit higher than what we saw in drama. Overall, Jason Reitman is a bit less popular, I think, than what happened with Sofia Coppola, but in a very similar range, and he still ends up very close to the top of the range for this to be influential, for this to be a good parameter inputted in the model. So also in the case of Jason Reitman, this was important. Overall, we have the genre patterns as well. And comparing them to the ones earlier, we see that comedy is present throughout the full projects. And this, of course, shows really well the presence of comedy and its importance in this movie for this prediction, in both the case of Juno and Young Adult, where, of course, drama and romance are present, but in much lower percentage compared to the comedy one. Now, let's go through them a bit more quickly, since now I hope it's clear how the tables are structured and how the things are done. So in the case of action, we're going to look into John Wick as an example. Again, we're selecting this. Imagine it will be released in the past, changing just the directors and the budget ranges. And we are going to select the first 5 for each budget range. And over here, there's one thing that is important to notice, which is the difference between the increase in prediction we can get for medium and high budget and the increase in prediction in average that we can get for the low budget range. In fact, the increase in prediction for the high and medium budget go all the way to 25, 34%, but for the low budget, it's more restricted. This is also due to the fact that in the action, it's almost very, very common to go for higher budget ranges for action movies. Therefore, and we also see that for lower budget, there's less of an influence for the director, with the top being the close funding reference that has a 13% of increase, and similarly, Garrett Evans. So in the case of action, we're selecting hyper use for this focus. If we go back to focusing on this director graph, which I think is really interesting to see the differences throughout the genres as well, we can see that the popularity of the director becomes very important, because the graph actually drops quite a bit after 30,000 or 40,000 in popularity ranking. So of course, in these cases over here, having a more popular director will be more beneficial for the prediction in the AI. And what this can be said similarly about adventure, which is exactly the next genre we're looking into. In this case, as I mentioned, movies from the past 20 years, we selected Castaway, which I hope it's not too old. I really loved it as a movie. Let's go and see directly our top 5 directors for each of the adventure cases. And here we start seeing less influence on directors for the low budget and medium budget. So overall, the values for the directors are less dramatic. There is a not very high increase for each of the directors. but we do find a lot of names that have an increase that is over 10%, which is the case for the director that we're going to look into the focus nest, which is Chris Columbus, which has an increase of 16.2%, and in fact has the highest ROI avenue of 1.6 for budgets of more than 100 million, which would mean, of course, more than 200 million in domestic revenue. As I mentioned, the graph over here is very similar to the action graph, where the importance of the popularity ranking of the director is really seen as it becomes quite higher for directors with less than 30,000, with a position of less than 30,000, and this drops with for directors that are less popular. And overall, the presence of adventure can be seen again in the patterns for Chris Columbus. We see its presence in the dynamic pattern throughout the full movies. The examples over here are very adventurous. We have Harry Potter and Chamber of Secrets and Percy Jackson. So both are cases where adventure is present throughout the whole movie, and this is also beneficial for the prediction. So to avoid boring you too much with all this talk, we're going to have a poll next. We're going to look into sci-fi, and we're looking at Tenet, which I'm sure is a movie that you've probably heard about. The poll would be for you to decide which you think would be the one that brings the highest ROI for this project if we're considering releasing it in the future. So what do you think would be the one with the highest ROI? So right now we're going to leave you some time through a poll over here to find out what you think. You should all see, I can see the screen with a poll, so just go ahead, select someone that you think would be the one that brings the highest return of investment. And I'm just going to wait for nod once we have a few answers, so we can go through it. It's exciting to see what people think. Of course, there's some, in a case such as this, we already have some ideas in mind, let's say, and we'll see. So hoping we would have. Oh, of course, I forgot to mention over here that we're looking into the high budget range. So we're looking at all directors that have an average budget that is higher than 60 million. So we do have some results, and I see, yes, that there's actually some people that have gone for the answer that was expected as well, and we have also answers with Ridley Scott, which is very interesting. Yes, and that's true, and it's actually all people that do appear in the top 5. So of course it was easier to select them. I hope everybody could see the results. I saw that there was Ridley Scott, but if we see the actual results, they're all pretty close. They're all above 16, so all would bring a very high increase in prediction just from that. So of course, like, the question was a bit tricky in the fact that all could bring a very huge prediction, but the AI found that Bryan Singer would bring the highest prediction in the case of this of similar projects. We are actually going to look into someone a bit different for this case, for the focus of the sci-fi. We're looking at John Krasinski. He has directed a movie in Sci-Fi, which has had a return of investments of 10.1. It's very successful for this movie, and he is found to have a prediction increase of 13.2. I wanted to point this out because this case of Sci-Fi is the case where the popularity of the director is seen the highest, as you can see from the graph. And John Krasinski, being a very popular actor already, he ends up very close to the top ranking of the director popularity. So this already has a big influence on the AI that decides that it will help increase the prediction. we're going to go through horror now, where we have the case of It selected, and we have again our 5 directors for each of the budget range. We have the least increase in the prediction overall. It's important to notice this because we have increases that go as low as 0.4% and only go as high as 15.5% for Eli Roth, for instance. So in this case over here, we can understand from this analysis that the director for this horror, for similar horror movies, might not be as important based on the AI as it was for other genres. So this is something that already we can understand from this, and we already know that selecting directors might not be as important as other aspects of the projects to increase the prediction as much as possible. We are looking into Andy Muschietti for this case, and he has a prediction increase of 11.1. He topped the list, the medium budget range list. So of course, it's already a really good increase. And in fact, he has directed the movie actually. He had with the highest ROI in the horror genre of 8.4. If we look at the graph that we have for the horror, in fact, it was pretty flat. Sorry for the technical thing. But if you look into his horror, previous horror films, we can really see the presence of horror being very, very important throughout the full this full pattern for both It and for another film that he has directed, which is Mama. And in both cases, we can see the brown pattern, which represents horror, being very present. And something that I think is also important is that it's not fully present in the full example, but there's also some up and downs for it to have some pause in some specific points of the patterns where there is some maybe breathing a breath of relief throughout rather than going through a whole horror movie. This could be something that is interesting to analyze from these patterns as well. Now, we have just a few genres left. We have romance. We selected the movie About Time, which is a romantic comedy. Over here, we have the list of directors, and it has a general pretty good increase. We are selecting the top one from the low budget list, which is Woody Allen. We already saw some of these examples patterns earlier, and right now we're going to look into his increase in prediction and in his ROI. So in the case of Woody Allen, we have a 32.5 plus potential increase when selecting Woody Allen for this project. We have, again, we can see higher influence on the popularity for this genre again. And in fact, Woody Allen with the vertical line ends up very close to the top of the list. So already popularity has an influence over here again as well. We're just showing a few of these examples of the patterns again, just to have a refresher. As we have mentioned, the patterns from Woody Allen are really similar because he has a very similar style. It has a very specific style that we can recognize from the patterns. And in fact, romance is present throughout. We have this nouns of romance throughout the full movies, as we can see over here in the examples of Midnight in Paris and To Rome with Love, very romantic. So we're almost at the end. I think thriller is going to be the last genre that we see over here. We're selected the movie Gone Girl, and we have our list of 15 directors coming up next. Over here as well, we have very, very high increases for some of the directors, and overall they're all above 10%. So in general, we see the importance of the director, of choosing the directors for the thriller genre. We are going to focus on Denis Villeneuve for the last director in focus that we have over here. We see that there's a potential prediction increase from the AI of 22.6%. And if we see the graph, we do have again a slower, let's say, still an increase towards more popular directors, but not so dramatic in the first part of the graph. And then the decrease is pretty fast, as we've seen in all the cases after 60,000 or 70,000 in the popularity ranking. So overall, this was the analysis that we had for the directors, and we as we had a lot of patterns to also see what this meant in terms of pattern, we're closing up with a pattern for this thriller movies directed by Denis Villeneuve. And the thriller over here is the light blue, it's the one on top. And in fact, we again see how present it is for the movie. We see how it is important throughout the full movies, and we see also its presence with other similar genres or genres that are coexist very frequently, such as the case of drama, which is the blue one. So to finish up, we wanted to give also a brief overview of examples that we have found for very low budget, so budgets below $5 million, because we also think it's important to take those into account as well. So we have selected one from each of the lists, not to bore you too much after seeing so many names already. We have selected for each of the genres, again, we have selected one, and we have, for instance, Alex Kendrick appearing with a increasing prediction potential, 7% for drama. We have the highest one being John Menendez for a comedy of 29.4. The lowest, unfortunately, is for sci-fi, Gonzalo Lopez Gallego, which is 5.7. For action and adventure, we have actually the same director, because his movie could be both action and adventure. Sometimes it's hard to define them correctly. So it's Iliana Schuller with 13.7 in action and 8% in adventure. Finally, we have horror. We have Greg McLean with 8.8, and for romance and thriller, we have higher increases again with Edward Burns with 28.5 and Dion Taylor for 22.7. So that is all that I have to share with you today. But I am so excited to have had the time to share all of this with you. And thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Ilaria. That was very eye-opening. I appreciate you going through every genre for us. Now we are going to finish today's workshop with a Q&A. If you have not already submitted your questions, please do so now in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. So I'm glad that you addressed films that had a budget of under 5 million, because that is what Anthony asked about. He wanted to know if that would be feasible. And he also wanted to know, what if it's a first-time director? So Sammy, could you answer that? You're muted. Oh yeah, great.
Can you repeat? Actually, I was just busy with
Anthony's full question was, what if the budget is below 5 million? How would you correlate that to AI? Would that be feasible? And he also wanted to know, what if it's a first-time director?
Yeah, of course. I mean, for any type of budget, it is feasible. It's about AI's learning. If AI has learned from similar type of budgets, that is the important thing. And for low budget case, of course, yeah, we have a lot of low budget films that has been fed to AI in the past, and it has learned about that. This way, it can make also predictions for low budget directors. But there's one point to emphasize: if it's a completely new director, first time director, AI won't have much to say, because once AI makes this prediction, it looks to connections with some past data. Once this doesn't exist at all, this is the limitation of AI. Then it has difficulties to provide confident result.
Well, that makes sense. Thank you. Ilaria, this question is for you from David Cunningham. How long do you think it will take to reach an optimum point with data input?
So actually, this is a very interesting question. A lot of the case is not so much a question of time, but more of availability. For instance, if we're considering the number of films that we have analyzed so far, it's really not, the bottleneck is not really the time, because we would have the time to analyze even more than that. A lot of these problems comes in with how much other people are want to share with the world, how much information they want to share. We have different sources for things, but some lower budgets, more independent films might be harder to get information from, and this is a pity, because we would love to insert more information from those. Of course, we do still have a lot, as Sami mentioned, we have information about lower budget movies as well. But for some of the lesser known actors, for instance, or lesser known films, it's a pity to miss some of the data to be able to create these patterns from those strongly as well.
Thank you. Sami, this is for you from Hugh Janes. Low budget in the UK is under £1 million. How does the director affect that size budget?
Under 1 million, it's a bit more challenge. Why it's more challenge? Because the data available for that films is not as the films that are above the 1 million. This is some discrimination we have seen in the data. The problem, yeah, I mean, still this kind of films have been analyzed. System can make the suggestions for these films if it is a feature film. By the way, if it's short film, that's not the case. But the confidences are a bit reducing. And once the confidence reduces, actually the system provides this financial forecast. It says, okay, here I predict with this director, with all parameters, I predict the financial return as this number. Then it gives confidence interval. So worst case and best case scenario. Once its learning is not too strong, that intervals might get wider. That means I don't have enough knowledge to tell more confident results. So for the films lower than 1 million budget, if it's too low than 1 million, that might be the problem. But if it's closer to 1 million, still I think there might be more confident insights by AI.
Ilaria, someone has asked you to put the Sci-Fi table of directors back up again and to give a little bit more of an elaboration on how you chose the directors for that genre. So if Sami, could we get the screen back up for Sci-Fi, please? Thank you.
Actually, that's a very interesting question, because for Sci-Fi, we have also a lot of different ideas what Sci-Fi is. We've had this discussion a lot of times also at work with our colleagues, etc. So what happens is that some people do define certain films as Sci-Fi and some doesn't. We are based on data, so we are selecting the genre for the films based on the data sources that we have. So in this case, we've selected movies where Sci-Fi was important in the genres. And these type of directors come from the selection. So by selecting first also the type of movies where Sci-Fi was important, we were able to then extract a list of directors and we're able to look at them more closely.
So here one thing maybe Ilaria to add is, I mean, once we tell Sci-Fi, okay, it doesn't mean only the director really has to make Sci-Fi films. In the past, there are many connections. Like thousands of connections. So if it can build some other connections in a way, it can also see the potential, something that has not been tried as a potential. Or you can see in some of examples, for example, the highest return on investment for a specific genre in the past for the director for this genre is 0, but AI is selecting as a good choice, although there is no proof in the past. But with all the recent change, because it considers many aspects, many points, okay? For example, he sees, okay, there's some potential connection in terms of the content, but also at the same time, the director's popularity maybe has increased, or in the familiarity in this market has increased. Now there's a potential for this specific genre. So for that reason, we should also look this also as a bit black box, that is many dots are connecting and some things are not visible easily to us. That is actually the place that AI bring an advantage.
Great. Sami, this is for you from Jeffrey Abramson. Did you evaluate the correlation of success to marketing budgets? Wouldn't marketing budgets be a strong indicator? Is that assumed in the distributor input?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, distributor input, distributor is strong element. It's also because of P&A budget. Because yeah, there are certain distributors, they are more generous, let's say, with the P&A budget and more strong with that. They make, let's say, wider releases. And of course, AI is learning also about these distributors. So once you get this distributor, that means, okay, you have more potential of a strong marketing, very strong release through their network. And independent from that, we have also as a P&A as an input to the model, which is normally a challenge for the producers because they are not distributor, they cannot know about P&A, but we strongly encourage also with all the producers that we are working with to a bit have more of insights of P&A, because eventually once you go to financiers, investors, you need to provide a plan, and P&A is really an important part of that. And it brings a good advantage if you already have an understanding of that. Also, if you go to distributor, you show it's certain P&A, what's the potential you see with the film that can increase also overall development of the film in packaging.
Ilaria, this one is for you. Given that top talent have bigger fan bases than top directors, and that in my experience, average audiences are attracted to the marquee names as opposed to director, how would you account for the director having significantly more effect on ROI than talent? Could this be down to the influence of distributors?
Yes, that's one part, but we shouldn't say that it has a lot more influence. I'd say that both have a very strong influence. When we mentioned the director had a very high influence, we also really wanted to point out how casting is also important to the overall prediction for the project. I'd also like to say that in case of directors, we have certain aspects. In terms of casting, we have different aspects as well. So there might be also different ways that we can provide input about the casting to the model. So for instance, what we do, we both provide information about the popularity, again, of the actors, but also what we call actor match, which we found is also important for the project, which is how much in terms of content does the actor how much does he match to the project in question. So there's something that we found as well. So I'd say that overall it's not so much lower than the director influence, and it comes in different aspects as well, which is interesting to see. However, the distributor is also important in the question, and we are looking into also how these correlate together and how these change together to bring the increase in prediction. So you're right in saying that the distributor also has an importance with the choice of director as well, and that's something that we're looking into as well. And that's something I forgot to mention, is that I'm not considering distributors for this case because I didn't want to create these type of bias in the data. We've given examples of big distributors and how much they have worked with bigger names before. So that's something that I took out of the equation to make sure that this didn't come into play with the specific case studies that we have over here. So sorry.
One more thing about the director, because director is not like casting. They don't have as much influence as the casting on the film. So director here, we look as a single parameter, but it has influence on many other decisions, many other parameters of the film. So this is indirect also impacts on that in this correlation. So so we should also look at this way.
Thank you both. Sammy, this is for you from Scott McKinley. Can you use your AI projections to raise money or convince investors for a specific project, including for a director who is not part of any of these projections discussed today?
Absolutely. Here, I mean, we just gave some examples to show how the data is valuable. So here there is like hundreds, thousands of directors you can put and then try, and director is only one parameter. Here, the idea is to create a package, okay, with all parameters, with your casting, director, potential distributor, P&A budget, and then content itself, because our system is also analyzing content. Then with that, you create a package that you can actually put in front of investors that will be a bit more scientific approach. And this is actually used a lot by with the partners that we are working with, the producers, that they come really at earlier stage of their film development. Then they can create their packaging, and not only one package, they can even also create alternative packages, like certain budget with certain casting directors and another one, and then they have the different projections. They can create their financing scenarios and approach to investors with those.
Ilaria, Anthony has another question. Can your AI also provide data for social media influencers and correlate them to the project? I think we're seeing more and more today, social media influencers such as Addison Rae from TikTok are now being used as stars of movies. So yeah, I would love to hear your answer to that.
So I think I'm gonna have to ask Anthony, like a bit more specifically, how this is how this should be correlated to the project exactly. So I'm gonna have to.
We have the advertisement example, I think, from that.
That's true.
So because we don't directly provide this to the social media creators, but for very short form, we provide the same service for commercials. So basically, then the same way, okay? So we have very short content, sometimes even 90 seconds, 60 seconds. And from that, the system predicts its engagement, for example, its potential YouTube engagement, the likability by the audience. So this has a potential application also for these social media creators, but we are not working in that direction at this stage.
So Sammy or Ilaria, Raj Rahi wants to know which directors are consistently elevating the art form and increasing the ROI?
This is a very interesting question. And I'd say that this doesn't always go hand in hand. One thing that we never want people to get out from these type of examples is that we're trying to say which one is better. It's like, that's not something that we can do. That's not something that we can really do with the AI. We can tell you which one is safer. We can tell you which one would be the highest, bring in the highest prediction. But overall, the creativity aspect that as humans we have is missing a bit from in the case of the AI. So in this sense, I'd say that it's really hard to say like which one would bring the more creative power to a project, because it's not something that is easy to depict from data. What we can do is find a way to measure the content in the project and allow you to select information on these measures of the content that reflect what you think would be creative power, let's say. So if you're looking for a project with a very high war aspect that talks about relationship, we can help you depict how much war, how much relationships can be extracted, can be predicted from your script, let's say, and then help you find ways to correlate better to what you have in mind. So I'd say it's harder to really say which one is the director that would be best, because it's not something that is really measurable very easily with data, right? Being a scientist, it's something that I don't think we can do at this stage, and we wouldn't want to do.
Does feel more subjective. Larry Kesh wants to know, and Sammy, maybe you can handle this one. Do you use Box Office Mojo for the box office comps?
We don't use a single specific data source. We have many data sources for teaching AI the financial implications. And it's also not only box office data as well, and especially looking at the today reality, the cinemas are not even open, and many filmmakers are looking for different models. So just also following box office data is not enough actually to provide a realistic financial implication for a film. So and then we collect more and more data also from like social behaviors, social response to the films by really following the social media platforms, the trend data all again coming as input to the system as well.
Larry has another question. Also, with IMDb rankings changing weekly, how does the algorithm take this into account?
Yeah,
so we have also.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, please. No, go ahead.
No, sorry. Yeah, I mean, we update very often as well our model. So it's not like we made a model, it stays 10 years over there. It is a very lively way of working, and the AI has to update itself very often as well. We don't update every day, but it's very frequent, like in a month of time, we really update the models with the new data.
And in this case, it's also worth to make sure that we are having somewhat of an average. In a lot of cases, it's safer to have also averages on values to make sure that they're not changing dramatically for some specific reason or from one day to the other. Just mentioning.
Let's wrap up with this final question, and I'd love to hear both of your thoughts. Sammy, first. I'm curious, what do you find to be the most interesting result from the case study on directors?
I think I will switch that question to Ilaria, as she presented this
All right,
part.
Ilaria.
She has more in-depth view on that for that part.
That's fair.
So one thing that I thought was really, really interesting was analyzing the difference of how much the director, and that's why I focus so much on this also during this presentation, was really analyzing the difference of the increase that we could have for different genres, for different projects. So seeing how dramatic it could be in one case and how instead didn't seem to change as much in other cases, such as the case with horror. So if I had to choose one specific case, I'd say that there was one thing that comes to mind because I was very surprised, and I also mentioned it earlier, was, for instance, the case of Billy Woodruff, where people that have been successful, but they're not really maybe considered a person, let's say for Billy Woodruff, he has a very active in the music industry. He's a huge name in the music industry as well. So I think it's something somewhat surprising to see him top the list of drama, for instance, in the as we have seen earlier. So I think a lot of these things are surprising, and they're very interesting because they give us information that we wouldn't consider. And I can tell you that one of my colleagues actually came to me and told me that he really wanted me to talk about John Krasinski in the case of Sci-Fi, because he was very, very excited to have found out about the movie through the analysis. So these are two cases where we were like, wow, that's very surprising. It's like, I knew this, I know the models, and still I was very surprised and very pleasantly surprised about these answers. So in both cases, I think it was helping us view the data from a different point, from a different viewpoint, because we have a certain idea of how things goes, and the AI has somewhat of an idea of also trying to extract the information without having all these social clues, social information being added. And I think that's interesting and very fun.
It is. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. And a special thank you to our speakers from Largo AI, Sammy and Ilaria. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to Largo directly. You can put your question in the chat, or we will put our email for Largo in the chat. And
I have just added info@largofilms.ch in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to reach us from that email.
Yes, perfect. Well, thank you again, everyone. Stay safe. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.